Hi, it's Kim from Sew A Lot, and I'm back here again for month number 2 of the Kona block of the month. We're going to be doing this block here in pinks and reds. It's really pretty. So let's get started. So to start with, let's look at the fabrics that we're using. We have our A fabric is peony. B fabric is the darkest color that you have. It is crimson. And then the next red is wine. That'll be C. And D is pomegranate. It's the darkest pink. And E is honeysuckle. It looks really bright next to D. And F is like a Barbie pink called bright pink. G is candy pink. And then we have white for H. So let's look at our cutting instructions first. I have here, I printed up my instructions, and on the sheet here I've placed my fabrics so I know which is which. And on page 2, we've got the cutting instructions here at the bottom. So our first set of cuts are going to be from fabrics A through C. Okay, so you're going to do is take your fabric, and the first cut you're going to make is you're going to cut 2 squares that are 4 by 7/8 inches, and then cut them diagonally so that you end up with 4 triangles. And you're going to do that same thing with the A, and then you're going to do that with B, which is crimson, and then you'll do it with C, the wine. So all 3 of these 4 7/8 inches cut diagonally 1 time. So I'm going to set these aside. Our next step is from the D, E, F, and G's. Get into our pinks. You're going to do the same thing. You're going to cut 1 4 by 7/8 inch square, cut it once diagonally to make 2 triangles. So on the first set, you cut 2 squares, and on this set, you're only cutting 1 square. So we have, this is D, which is pomegranate. E is honeysuckle. Do the same thing. F, bright pink. 1 square, 4 by 4 7/8 inches. And G, candy pink. And you'll cut those once diagonally. Okay, I'm going to set these to the side. The last one you're going to cut is white, H. For white, you're going to cut 8 4 7/8 inches. So you'll cut 8 blocks, 8 squares, and then cut them all diagonally 1 time. So you'll end up with 16 triangles. All right, now what we're going to do first is make half square triangles out of these. On the first set of instructions, you're going to take your A through H fabric, so all the colored triangles and the H's, and we're just going to make half square triangles out of all of them. So on our chart on page 3, it will show you at the top here the combinations, all with the H's, and then how many of each you're going to make. So you're not going to use all of your pink triangles. There's 4 of them that you won't be using. We'll be setting those aside. Okay, so to start with, what you're going to do is you're going to take one of your pink triangles and one of the white triangles. You're going to put them together, line up your points, your edges. If your triangles turn out to be different sizes, what I did was I lined up the right angle here instead of lining up the edge. So the edge might have been a little bit off, but I had the main right triangle angle up here together. And then I sewed 1/4 of an inch from the longer edge. And that way, if it didn't turn out the right size, then to just trim it down to the correct size. So I was afraid if I lined up my diagonal where I was sewing that my square might turn out too small. So I lined up this corner out here. Then you'll sew along the long edge 1/4 of an inch. So to start with, you're going to start with A, which is our peony pink. And you can see I stitched it along the long edge 1/4 of an inch, opened it up, and it actually turned out the right size because we cut the squares 4 7/8 and cut on the diagonal then and sewing 1/4 inch. Your squares actually should turn out to be 4 1/2 inches. So if there's any trimming to do, it won't be much, if anything, but it does make it more important to watch your seam allowance, because if your seam allowance is too big, then your square is going to be too small. So better to make that seam allowance too small than too big, because then you can always square it up and trim it up. Some of mine needed trim, some of them didn't. The one thing I did have to do on all of them was to cut off the dog ears on the corners. So I have 4 half square triangles in the peony, A and H. The B fabric with the H, you're going to make 3 of these, so you'll have 1 extra over here. C and H, this one's wine, 3 of those and 1 extra over on the side that you're not going to use. Then you'll make 1 D, and D you're going to use the 2 triangles that you have to make 2 squares. On E, you're only going to use 1 triangle and have 1 extra on the side. F, you're going to use 1 triangle and you'll have 1 on the side. And G, you're going to use 2 of your pink triangles, no extras. So you should only have 4 extra triangles that you're not using. Just 4. Okay, and all these have been checked to make sure that they're 4 1/2 inches. After you get your half square triangles done, there's not a lot of steps to this. This is a very easy month. We're going to go ahead and lay out the square. So what we're going to start with is we're going to go to the diagram here on page 3, and we're going to lay out our block like step number 2. In the center, you have an E and an F. So our single ones, the E, which is honeysuckle, is going to go in the upper left-hand corner of the center, and F in the lower right-hand corner. So bright pink and honeysuckle. In our other corners, we've got B and C. So that's a crimson and a wine. C is wine. It's going to face the corner in the lower left-hand corner, and crimson's going to go in the upper right-hand corner facing out. So this is our center square. Okay, so now around it in the corners is A. So each corner will be the A block. So each of the A's in the corners with the pink facing the corner. Okay, so now I'm going to take, I have 2 D blocks are going to go in the upper left-hand corner, and the pinks are going to point inward towards one another. B is the right-hand corner, which is the crimson. So we will have a solid corner there of crimson. And down in the right-hand corner is G, candy pink, and those are going to face one another. And over in the left-hand corner, C, which is wine, will finish off this corner. It's interesting how these are all wine and crimson, and then these, the pinks change color all the way through across. So that is very pretty. Now it's just time to sew it together. Not much to it. So how I'm going to do this is in rows. I'll put like row 1 together, row 2, so row 3 and row 4. So it's time to sew. When these blocks were pressed, they were pressed with the seam allowance towards the darker side, the pinks. And so when I go to put these together, I can nest those seams. Okay, and now I've got my blade saver here, so I've got these chained together. I'll use the blade saver to break my threads, and I'm gonna check these. All I gotta do is put those together. Now these are not nesting, so I'm just gonna watch carefully that going over that bump of that seam doesn't throw the alignment off. Okay, I'm just checking to see that my points down at the bottom come together and that I'm about a 1/4 inch away from the edge. Crimson needs to go like this, and the pinks need to go like this. These two need to be across from one another. Therefore, if I take crimson on top of the pinks and line it up here, this one goes over here, and the wine goes right here. So I do have a little tip here. When you're sewing these triangles together and you put them together and you go to start sewing, and let's say you start here, if your machine is getting stuck at the beginning and knotting up, check and see if this is the side where the seams come together. Start at the other end where the seams don't come together and come the other direction. So start here where there's no seams and then come down and end where the seams are. It'll be a little bit better. It won't knot up with you at the beginning. Okay, so we've got those two, and now our last row. So a whole quilt out of these colors be a great Valentine's quilt. There's wine on that side, pinks on this side, those on top of those, line them up. So I've got seams coming together here. So when I start to sew, pin those, I'm gonna start to sew at the opposite end where there are no seams. There we go. Okay, so there's the 4 rows. Now we need to press these rows. I'm gonna do the pressing of the rows in opposite directions. And I always, for some reason, I always press 1 and 3 to the left and evens to the right. It's just a little thing I do. Don't know why, but it works. And I never forget. You could press these open too. Okay. So now I'm going to sew the rows together. 1 to 2 and 3 to 4. Got to have some matching up to do. I'll start by nesting the end, and I'm going to use pins this time. Make sure I get my seams to match good. These will match right up. Okay, in the center here we've got some points, and I want to make sure they match, so I'm going to stick a pin in those. So I try to keep my little tails, if they keep them straight out, after I get things pinned, I can go across and cut them off all at one time. Now we're going to pin 3 to 4. Okay, the center has another point, 2 points to line up. I'll put my pin in quite high enough. Okay, push them together and nest my other seams. All right, it's time to sew. So I tried to watch the points where this seam and this seam cross and stitched right across it. So let's take the pins out and we can see if it's where I need it to be. Okay, so this matched up pretty good. I'm good over here. I'm a little off here. That pink's a little high. So I think that I will take this seam out right here, just from this little section, and see if I can align those a little differently. Let's take a look at row 1 and 2. Not bad there. A little far apart right there in the center, and the ends look good. So this center part, what I can do is go back and just stitch a little bit down lower to pull those points together. So I tried not to go too much further, just enough. See if I got it. It's better. I think that one will do okay. This one down here, I'm going to take out stitches 1 inch before and 1 inch after. Okay, so I've got 2 new matches that I'm doing here. On this side here, I'm going to try to get those closer together. And then I'm going to try to match that up to that one again. So on this side, it just looks like I've got my crimson setting too high when I lined it up. And these are, you know, not real bad spots, but if I can make them better, I'll give it a try at least once. So my first step is on row 4 here, or no, this is row 3. I'm going to sew down the center. I'm going to shorten my stitch length to a 2.0 to help strengthen that at the end of the block. Okay, so let's take a peek in here. Much better on that side. So now that'll be a better point to position with this point. So now I can take another pen and try again to line up those two points. So sew across this seam again where we took out 1.5 inches on both sides of that seam. Okay, so let's see if these match up. That is better right there. It's still not perfect, but it's certainly better. Good enough to leave. Okay, so one last seam to sew is across the center, and then this pretty block will be done. So I'm going to have points to line up here and here. And these blasted threads, we'll get rid of those. If you get frustrated matching up points or getting your points right so that they match up good, all I can say is keep doing them. It does get easier and they do get better. All right, we're going to look down the center line here. I don't like that one, but I like this one. Okay, let me look at this one and see what we can do. So it looks like I can sew in further or out further and bring that down. They're off a little bit, but I think I can live with that. I'm going to take it and I'm going to sew from this direction this time. My seam flipped on me and everything. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to take out these stitches where the seam flipped and made it really thick. And let's see if I flip it the other way, if that'll pull that together for me. So there it is redone. Better, still a little bit apart. I'm going to go back one more time. I'm going to sew closer to those points. So I am sitting too low for my sewing machine, and I'm having a hard time seeing where I'm sewing at, and that's part of my issue here. So you want to, you know, make sure that's where a cabinet comes in real handy, because I can lower the machine and see down onto the bed of my machine and see exactly where my needle's going. So I'm happy with that. I'm going to leave that. Just need to press and this block will be done. So there we have it. This is February's block of the month for the Kona block of the month. It's pretty. Looks pretty good. It didn't take too long. So I hope you enjoy making yours. Okay, so that's it for February. I hope you enjoy making your block, and I'll see you next month. Bye.